Everyone's cheers and celebrations echoed throughout the city. Everyone cheered and waved their hands in one direction, calling, "Hero, look here, hero." The hero riding on a handsome horse raised his hand to greet the people. The people stood cheering and calling for the hero, "Here he is." The hero walked among his entourage and headed towards the palace. The people of the kingdom stood on both sides of the road to welcome and applaud the hero. The cheers of the people echoed throughout the kingdom, cheering for Isgard. In a small alley, there were two brothers running towards the main road leading to the palace. The older brother hurriedly ran ahead, and the younger sister also ran after, calling, "Brother, slow down a bit." The brother turned his head and urged his sister, "Hurry up, the parade is about to end." The sister lamented, "Brother, I'm tired." The older brother turned around and continued running and said, "Well, I told you to hurry up." Right now, in front of us was a person wearing a black cloak walking back towards the two brothers. When approaching the person wearing a black robe, the brother suddenly stopped and watched the person wearing a black robe pass by. Her sister caught up with her brother and saw him stop and asked, "Dear, I told you to go slowly, but why did you stop?" The younger brother turned to look at the person in the black robe with questioning eyes. After the man in the black cloak passed by the two brothers, the younger brother looked in the direction of the cloaked person, wondering. The parade was over there. The older brother immediately stopped, whispering to the younger sister, "Don't look, you idiot." The brother told his sister, "That man was a black magician." The sister asked again, "Black magician?" The brother replied, "Yes." The brother whispered to his sister, "He was cursed." At a palace high above, a holy woman stood by the window looking at the kingdom. Looking at the kingdom. Suddenly, the saint felt something. The saint looked out the door and saw a person wearing a black robe entering. The saint looked at the black magician and said, "You have returned, Manold. With this, the ultimate threat of Isgard has finally been eliminated. I want to thank you on behalf of the entire empire." Manold interrupted, "That's enough. Just fulfill her last promise. Right now." The saint replied to Manold, "I remember that, don't worry, Manold." "No. Should I call you Kim Minjun?" "No." The black magician took off his cape to reveal his handsome face. The saint said, "I'll tell you one more time, but I won't entrust you with work in the name of a black magician because I don't like you." Manold replied, "I also hate you so much that I could die right away." "Here you go, holy lady," you continue. "There's no denying what you've secretly done for the empire. That's something I'm always grateful for. Even though you're a mess, you've accomplished more than expected to change the prejudices about dark mages in Isgard." The saint asked Manold again, "I ask you again, do you really want to return to your real world?" Manold replied, "Yes. Let me go back now, I've worked here enough." The saint sighed and said, "If you stay, it's for the good of the empire. I promise you will be compensated for all the hardships you have received and more." Manold said with a smile, "Stop acting, saint." The saint blushed and asked Manold, "What do you mean I'm acting? I'm being very honest." Manold asked the saint, "So what will you give me?" The saint heard that and asked again, "Huh?" Manold stood up, dusted himself off and said, "You forced me here, used me as a slave, and now what else? You want me to stay in the dark and act as a lackey so I can have you clean up the mess for me?" Manold raised his hand to his body, looked at the saint menacingly and asked, "In short, will you let me go back?" The saint opened her hands and said, "If you stay, I will give you anything you want. Manold, if you disappear, our empire will." Manold immediately said, "Bring me Korean fried chicken." After listening, the saint asked again, "Huh?" Manold continued, "And boiled pig's feet, you know those things. The food at home is wonderful. You just gave me some dry rich biscuits. It was more like animal food than food for children. People, how can you expect me to live here when you only feed me that trash food?" After hearing this, the saint looked down as if she had just experienced a big blow and said, "We will try to improve that." Manold immediately continued to say the conditions. "Okay, don't mind what I said. Then bring me a high configuration computer with outstanding technical specifications and can connect to the fastest internet speed. I need to receive a bonus from the super game, League of Legends, as a challenger, so please give it to me quickly." Having said that, Manold thought to himself, "I really have top intelligence. That's high." The saint heard what Manold said and shouted, "Stop, stop, why don't you ask about the things I can give you in Isgard?" The holy woman clenched her fist and said, "Ha, I understand." The saint looked down and said to the Manold, "We will begin the return ceremony." After entering the summoning room, Manold looked at the door. Manold looked around and smiled happily and said, "Hey, I've been here for a long time. There are indeed many memories, even though I don't want to see you again." The saint showed an unwilling expression on her face but still said, "Stand in the middle of the stone pedestal with the summoning mark, the exact place where you were originally summoned." Manold stood in the middle of the formation. The holy woman began to perform the formation. The saint said to Manold, "I will release my protection first." Manold took off his gloves, looked at the hand and thought, Divine protection, it's called protection. But actually it's just a magical mark that prevents me from fighting that woman. I will finally be freed from this magic circle, finally. The Saint slowly removed the magic mark on the Minold's hand. The Saint asked Minold, I really don't understand you. You have great power here, both wealth and fame you will receive. Why do you try to give it up? Minold did not answer the question asked the Saint and instead said, concentrate on what you are doing, Saint. Minold said, aren't you worried? Once this magic mark disappears, you could die by my hands. After the Saint removed the mark on Minold's hand, she said, I have accepted that since I started everything. The Saint turned away and said, the divine protection has been removed. You can kill me if you want. If you have no intention of killing me, I will begin the next stage of the ritual. Minold looked bewildered at his unmarked hand. The Saint walked away and said, now I will take away all the power you have in Isgard. Minold smirked. The Saint said, it will be dangerous for you to travel through time and space if you bring the power here. Before she finished speaking, the Saint was tied by Minold's neck with purple power. Minold lifted the Saint up high. The Saint used both hands to hold the purple power that was controlling her and shouted. The Saint turned around uncomfortably and asked, what is this? Minold laughed cheerfully and said, do you know how difficult it was for me to gain powers like this? Do you really think I would give them up? Clearly, having to give up these powers is just a lie of yours. Stop. Minold regained her strength, and the Saint immediately fell to the ground. The Saint looked at Minold and thought, I know what he is planning, but with dark magic, he will not be able to activate the time-space portal. Suddenly, the Saint opened her eyes wide, surprised. Minold himself used his power to activate the time-space gate to return. Seeing this, the Saint was surprised and thought, how could he open the time-space gate with dark magic? The Saint shouted to stop Minold, stop, you can't travel through time and space so hastily. Minold replied, I know. That's why I have practiced it thousands of times. After all, I have reached the peak of my dark magic power. You guys are so strange. Why do you have to divide magic into light and dark? It's all the same. After hearing this, the Saint was silent. Minold remembered something and said, oh, I have something to give you before I leave. Minold reached into his pocket to grab something. Minold raised his fist. Minold raised his fist as he entered the space-time portal and said, it's really nice to know you. Damn Saint, let's never meet again. If I ever see you again, you're dead. Minold said goodbye. The Saint knelt on the ground, raised her hand and shouted loudly, stopping. But the Saint was too late. After the Minold entered the space-time gate, the gate immediately radiated a terrifying power. The power slowly subsided. That power stabbed straight into the sky. After seeing this, the Saint immediately slammed her hand on the ground. The Saint angrily said, do you think I really want to do this, you crazy person? The scene of the Earth appears. In the room where Minold once lived, purple power appeared coming from the window. After the explosion of power in the room, Minold returned to Earth. Minold's name was Kim Minjun. Kim Minjun appeared in his room. Around Minjun's body, there was still an echo of strength that had not yet dissipated. Minjun knelt on the ground panting. Minjun's eyes widened in horror as if he had just gone through a life-and-death battle and thought, I didn't expect to travel through a time-space portal. I didn't expect this damn thing, at any moment. After a while, Minjun slowly stood up. Minjun looked out the window thoughtfully for a moment. Minjun noticed the table, his phone was still plugged in, and was happy. Minjun walked towards the table. Minjun picked up the phone. Minjun held the phone in his hand and happily said, I've missed this for so long. Minjun opened his phone. The wallpaper was Minjun's favorite game. Minjun said, that's it, my phone, key. Minjun immediately logged into the game, happily and excitedly shouted, ha ha ha, I'm finally back from that hell. Suddenly, something appeared on the phone. Minjun looked closely and wondered, A warning appears on the phone, unable to connect to the network, please check the connection status and try again. Later, under Minjun's house, a squad of armed soldiers searched around the neighborhood. All the soldiers pressed against the wall. A soldier in the lead asked, it's going this way, right? The soldiers following closely replied, yes, the observer has located it for us. The soldiers followed closely and asked the leading soldier, Corporal Choi In-ho, what all this nonsense was. Why did they mobilize ordinary soldiers like us? Choi In-ho replied, how can that be a matter for you? As far as I know, go ask the executive officer. All the soldiers were leaning against the wall when they suddenly heard a noise. The soldiers turned to be alert. Corporal Choi In-ho took the lead and ran out. Other soldiers followed. As soon as he ran out of the alley, Choi In-ho raised his gun, ready to attack. Choi In-ho looked through the viewfinder and was surprised. Minjun walked on the street talking to himself, so it's been 2 years since I was summoned to that hell. I'm still quite surprised to think that I can return here. Minjun continued, thanks to data metering, my phone still works, but I don't have anyone to contact. What's wrong with the internet in the neighborhood? I can't connect to the network. Minjun walked away shaking his phone frantically and said, meaning this place doesn't have Wi-Fi, why isn't there a store? The two soldiers saw Minjun walking so leisurely and asked each other, hey, that is, he looks like a civilian. Minjun lamented, how long have I been in Isgard? I think on Earth too, it's only been 2 years past. Choi In-ho saw this and asked his colleague, I think the common people are restricted to this area, I don't understand how those stupid guards work. Choi In-ho called Minjun over, hey, young man, come over here. Minjun saw this and wondered why there were military soldiers in this residential area. Kim Minjun turned around and said to Choi In-ho, sorry, I just wanted to go over here for a bit. Saying that, Kim Minjun thought, well, I guess maybe they are doing situational training, they seem to be difficult higher than before, but don't they just need to practice walking around the neighborhood? Choi In-ho shouted loudly warning Minjun, the young man, to run away. Minjun was bewildered then turned his head to look, a mutated wolf was pouncing on Minjun. Minjun stood there as if he wanted to fight the wolf immediately. Minjun looked at the wolf that was rushing towards him ferociously. He frowned and calmly said, this stupid dog is not even worth punching. Suddenly he realized something and thought, He looked down at his left hand and thought, my dark energy had completely disappeared. Then Minjun quickly grabbed the dog's head. He hit the ground hard, his strength was not average, he could handle the ferocious dog with one hand. When the soldiers saw that, their mouths opened wide, forming an A or an O, startled in surprise. The dog suffered such a physical impact that his mouth was bloody, his teeth fell out, and the ground was broken into bricks. Minjun calmly looked at the dog and said slowly, stupid dog. Minjun continued to handle the dog, making the others turn pale and scared. After finishing, his face was still stained with blood, he slowly stood up and said, do you think I'm just a useless guy who can't use magic due to lack of dark energy? Even if I become weaker, it's also not at a level where a scum monster like you can defeat me. Then he thought of himself in the past, training so hard that he could carry a big rock on his head under the whips. His face darkened and he thought, this reminded me of the time I trained in Isgard. Suddenly he frowned, dark circles taking over half of his eyes, looking down lifelessly thinking, but. He looked at the dead dog with its mouth open on the ground, with blood surrounding it. He wondered, why did you appear in this world? Minjun stood up with his left hand stained with blood, his right hand still holding the phone. His clothes were also stained with blood. The soldiers behind saw this and were startled to take a few steps back. Minjun turned half around and said, sorry, sir. He hadn't finished his sentence when the young soldier was startled and looked scared and said, don't come near here. Heading into the evacuation base, 1 kilometer away. The car with a camouflage design was going very fast. A voice inside the car asked, I don't understand why you went so far, young man. Minjun wiped his face and body while looking at the young soldier driving the car and continued, but you could go to jail for that, because the commander told us not to overdo this, so you can go. The young soldier looked at Minjun and continued, but, do you really not know what's going on these days? Minjun smiled softly and replied, yes, I was abroad. Actually in his heart he thought, exactly in another world. Then the smile suddenly disappeared from his lips, he looked thoughtfully and thought, this is not the career I used to know, what has happened in these 2 years? Minjun thought about the monsters. The dungeon phenomenon appeared when I was about 7 years old, the monsters from the dungeon started appearing in real life, I remember there were soldiers fighting them like now. With the appearance of the dungeon, awakened superheroes appeared. With abilities superior to normal people, join the newly formed Hunter Corps at the military base, and quickly eliminate monsters as soon as they appear. So, before being summoned by some crazy saint, Korea had no more danger in the residential area. Minjun said boredly, wait, is it possible? He looked down at his phone that couldn't connect to the internet and thought, the most powerful fighter, this server hasn't completely disappeared, right? Minjun pressed repeatedly on that touch screen, his lips pursed, sweat was pouring down his face, he tensed and thought, no, I went through a lot to come back and it's like this. I want to play powerful dungeon fighter, I really want to play that damn game, wow, this damn network, I want to see if the server is open again, hurry up. The young soldier was driving and looking at Minjun thinking, the whole world is in the same mess, but he doesn't know because he just came back from abroad, that's suspicious. Then he thought about Minjun treating the dog nicely earlier, sweat pouring down his face and thinking nervously, but I don't want to find out, I'm sure he has something personal. Suddenly Minjun's call took him out of his thoughts, hey. Minjun said nervously, have the people moved to a safe place, like the game developers, do you think they can still work during this time, like a game company, for example? What about the destroyed buildings, the server storage system not even working, what happened to create this this mess? He kept asking like that. The soldier replied, I'll tell you what I know, after all, I got an A+ in monster theory and dungeon theory in college. Minjun asked, do they still study such things in college now? The other person said, "It's difficult to find schools that don't teach those subjects." The soldier looked at the driveway and continued, explaining why the situation had gotten worse. Then he started telling the story. It was because of the strange phenomenon that started appearing in the dungeons 2 years ago. One day, dungeons started appearing more frequently. And it gets bigger and bigger, but the biggest problem is the number of giant monsters is increasing. They come from these strange dungeons. The soldier tightly grasped the steering wheel and said, because of that, the army could no longer control the dungeons, and the situation became worse and worse, leading to the need to quarantine some residential areas. From then on, the army used various measures to fight back, but we were short of forces. Minjun's eyes were filled with sadness and disappointment. Minjun thought, it's not like that, brother. Are those game companies still okay? I still want to play powerful dungeon fighter. How stupid. Then the soldier asked, how old are you now? Minjun replied, I think, I'm 21. Hearing that, the soldier replied, oh my gosh, that means you should join the army immediately. Half of your 20s are about to disappear into thin air. Minjun wondered and asked, half, 5 years for the Hunter Corps and 3 years in the army. The new soldier replied, because the situation is getting worse in recent years, all the armies are now because everyone has to serve for 5 years, not just the Hunter Corps. If you're 21, maybe you already have a registration letter. Minjun said in panic, 5 years is a lie. Then his face darkened thinking, wait, it's a bit serious isn't it? I want to play powerful dungeon fighter after I get back and just to run away and heal. Minjun's face was red, his eye veins were bulging, he gritted his teeth and thought, but I have to enlist for 5 years right now, when I haven't even been able to connect to the server yet. Suddenly his phone vibrated, a text message from the state was sent. Minjun suddenly looked down at the phone in his hand. Reading the text message, he thought, what the heck, announcing the enlistment date for X Division. Minjun said, tomorrow is enlistment day, could this be spam? The timing is perfect. The new soldier smiled and said, it's true, this sound effect is so strange. Minjun still calmly said, it real. Then he panicked and said loudly, what, is it true? Why the hell would you just let him join the army without a physical examination? The scream startled the soldier. Minjun continued to ask indignantly, and why didn't he give a day's notice? The soldier immediately said, I told you, we don't have enough manpower, so you will usually do the physical examination right at the training center. And that announcement, you probably saw it late. Why don't you go to the PC room near the evacuation base to check? Kim Minjun was stunned by the soldier's answer, his face opened wide, his mouth gaping open as he listened. Minjun was quickly in the computer room, playing games and thinking to himself, when my parents went missing, I just sat in the house and played games. So, I was summoned to Isgard without a single friend. Mankind's forgotten paradise. He sat and played fighting games. He thought with emotion, the PC room is the best, this divine game is still the same. How long has it been since I fought a boss? Minjun said while playing, I want to thank the owner of this establishment for opening the door during such a difficult time. Oh, a new item. He looked out and called the staff. Bring me a hot dog. Miss the employee looked at him thinking, how could he eat so much? Minjun finished eating the hot dog and placed the wooden stick on the table. He put his hand up and said, this. He looked at the computer screen and said, it's true. Minjun continued to research. After satisfying my gaming needs, I checked the new news on the internet. Everything that soldier said was correct. Even the enlistment date was announced by the military department. As the message said, it was tomorrow. If I possess the power of Isgard, I can erase all the dungeons. But for some reason, my body has completely lost its dark energy, which is the main source of energy for dark magicians. It's not that I can't defend myself now, I can still erase the evil. The dungeon is okay. Minjun leaned on his hands and thought, extremely tense. Then he said loudly, yes, that's what I should do. A bunch of people in the computer room were startled and turned to look at him. He looked at the computer screen and smiled happily and said, yes, great, just wait. I'll handle all of this. He smirked, looking like he was plotting something. The next day, at the military enlistment site, the atmosphere was extremely bustling, with people sending people off. Minjun leisurely ate the delicious grilled meat and walked over. He looked around and said, hey, there are so many people here. On this side, an old mother sees her eldest son off to join the army. On the other side were lovers saying goodbye to each other, sobbing. Kim Minjun leisurely walked past the bustling crowd holding a stick of meat. He smiled and said, everyone's in a bad mood. Suddenly an announcement rang out, please pay attention, all soldiers, go to the auditorium immediately. Minjun walked in with his hands in his pockets. They just said the army is not the same as before. Is it the same as Isgard? Just wait, pack your weapons. Everyone followed the announcement and entered. A shout rang out in the room, stand up straight, you idiot, are you here for a picnic? Hey, you idiot, why are you so slow? Everyone has already lined up, the platoon leader is still shouting, keeping his head straight. He was wearing dark glasses and scolded repeatedly. Couldn't he see the person in front? The guy next to him was equally scolding, move forward, just push people forward like your lives depended on it. The people below pushed and said, keep moving forward. Minjun suddenly looked, wow, they're still shouting at each other, is this the best you can do? Kim Minjun thought about the previous miserable days of being tortured, whipping his body and being scolded continuously. Hey, I told you to do it, why didn't you listen to me? You look at the situation now and think, I did it. Forgot to kill that bastard before coming here, these guides are awesome. A Marine soldier whose name read Kim Sang-soo spoke up, paying attention. He said, now, before we start, raise your hands if you want to join the Hunter Corps but haven't had the chance yet. As you know, the treatment of Hunter Corps is very different from other corps, the basic salary is from 3 million won. He said that but no one raised their hands. He continued asking, no one. Kim Sang-soo said with sad eyes, it was just a formality, so don't worry. Now, he was talking and the person next to him interrupted, battalion commander. He pointed out to Sang-soo that there was a volunteer. Sang-soo suddenly asked, who? The other guy immediately called out, he was raising his hand, come here immediately. Kim Minjun immediately walked over and said, yes. It turned out that the arm belonged to Minjun. He stepped forward and put all his strength into his legs and jumped up. He jumped up so high that he almost hit the ceiling, making the enlisted soldiers gasp. The guides also looked up and exclaimed, terrified. Minjun landed in front of the wooden platform. Kim Sang-soo looked at him in surprise, he quickly stood just 3 steps in front of him. Minjun laughed and said loudly, Kim Minjun would like to run for office, I want to join the Hunter Corps. Isgard, Northern Region, Forgotten Canyon.